In the deep silence of space, far from human worlds, the Galactic Council floated above the shining planet Zenthar Prime. The station was enormous, built from silver metal and glowing crystals, a place where hundreds of alien races gathered to maintain peace across the galaxy. Inside its wide circular hall, leaders from different civilizations were busy discussing trade routes and new discoveries when a sudden alarm echoed through the chamber. A red holographic signal appeared in the center of the hall, spinning fast, its message written in multiple languages. It was a distress call, and it carried the mark of desperation. The Valari species, a peaceful race known for their gentle nature and soft blue skin, were begging for help. Their message came from a colony world on the outer edge of known space. The voice of the Valari leader trembled as he spoke. His words were short, broken, and full of fear. "This is Valari Prime. We are under attack. Unknown ships. Our defenses are failing. Please, help us." Then the transmission cut off. For a moment, the whole chamber went silent. The air was heavy. The Valari were beloved by many species. Artists, scientists, and diplomats who never engaged in war. No one could understand who would attack them. Soon another screen lit up, showing data collected from deep space sensors. The enemy ships were large, moving fast, and armed with weapons that broke every known law of energy control. They used plasma storms to melt planetary shields and strange gravity bombs that ripped ships apart. Even the strongest defense fleet would have struggled against such power. The Council's main hall turned into chaos. Representatives began shouting in their own languages. Some demanded immediate help. Others argued that they couldn't risk their own fleets until they knew who the attackers were. A few said that helping the Valari could start a galactic war. The head speaker, an ancient creature with silver eyes, called for order, but no one listened. Fear filled the room. Every second, more fragments of the Valari transmission arrived. Images of burning cities, broken ships, and people running through fire. The sound of screaming echoed in the background of the last message they received. Some species wanted to act quickly. The Ardalons, a proud warrior race, offered to send a small fleet, but their offer came with conditions. The Valari would need to surrender certain mining rights in exchange for protection. Others, like the Lurathi and the Iran, said the Council should form a committee to study the attackers first. The debate dragged on while the Valari world was dying. A few leaders looked down, ashamed. No one wanted to make the first move. Then something unexpected happened. A quiet voice from the far end of the chamber broke the noise. It came from a representative who rarely spoke. A tall human delegate named Commander Alara Hayes. She had been observing silently while others argued. Her eyes were calm but filled with determination. "While you all argue about rules," she said, "an entire world is burning." Her voice echoed across the hall. Some laughed softly, others turned away. The humans were new to the Council, often seen as reckless and too emotional. The older civilizations called them Death Worlders, beings who had evolved on a dangerous planet filled with storms, predators, and diseases. They were respected for their strength, but also feared for their unpredictable nature. The head speaker reminded her that no one could send fleets without majority approval. Alara didn't answer. She just touched a small device on her wrist. A faint blue light blinked once, then went dark. The Council session continued, unaware of what she had done. Meanwhile, far away in the Sol system, deep inside the human command network, an alert appeared on a hidden channel. It was a coded message, short, urgent, and marked Level Omega. The AI operator scanned it, recognized Alara Hayes' personal signature, and automatically routed it to the highest command level on Earth. In less than 2 minutes, the message reached the Unified Earth Defense Authority. On Earth, the sky over New Geneva lit up as orbital docks came online. Hundreds of ships powered up, their engines glowing bright like tiny suns. Across Mars and the moons of Jupiter, military outposts began to move. It was the start of something enormous. But back on Zenthar Prime, the Council didn't know yet. As the debate stretched into hours, reports continued to pour in. The Valari's defense grid had failed completely. Half their fleet was gone. Civilians were being evacuated, but the attackers were targeting escape transports. The hall fell into nervous silence again. Some suggested contacting mercenaries. Others wanted to close communication and declare the system lost. No one wanted to take responsibility. At that moment, a trembling Valari representative entered the chamber. His name was Saran Vilar, His usual calm voice was now broken by exhaustion. "My people are dying," he pleaded. "We believed in this council. We helped build this alliance. Will you really just watch us fall?" His words struck deeply, but still no one moved. The council had protocols, laws, and long discussions, but not courage. Then the communication hub flickered again. A new signal appeared, but this one didn't come from the Valari system. It came from somewhere else, a deep space relay near the edge of known space. The message was short and clear, carrying the human seal. "Distress signal received. Humanity acknowledges the request for aid." Everyone froze. The room fell utterly silent. No one had authorized that. The head speaker asked who had given permission for human intervention. Elara Hayes stood quietly, saying nothing. The other delegates whispered to each other, disbelief spreading like a wave. Humans had just broken council protocol. They had acted without approval. But before anyone could stop them, another alert came in from the long-range sensors. Massive movement had been detected from the Sol system. Dozens of ships were leaving human space, traveling faster than any council fleet could ever move. The realization struck the chamber like thunder. Humanity had not waited for debate. They had already launched their fleet. Inside the Valari system, the skies burned red as the invaders continued their assault. The last of the Valari defense cruisers fell, and the surface was filled with explosions. Families hid underground, praying for a miracle. Their leaders had already given up hope. Then, deep in the black void beyond their sun, new signatures appeared on radar, hundreds of them. On Xanthar Prime, the council's main screen showed the live feed. Elara Hayes stood watching quietly as the feed came in. "What is this?" one delegate demanded. The human delegate answered softly. "That is the response." For the first time in years, the council chamber was speechless. No one argued, no one objected. They all just watched as the impossible began to unfold. The humans were coming, and they were bringing with them the deadliest fleet ever built by any civilization. Back on Earth, Commander Elara received confirmation on her wrist device. The signal she had sent was successful. Operation Aegis response was in motion. She knew what that meant. Once humanity committed, they would not stop until the threat was gone. She closed her eyes for a moment, knowing what kind of destruction their fleet could unleash. But she also knew that if they didn't act, an entire race would vanish. On the council station, the head speaker finally spoke. "They did not ask for permission," he said quietly. "They only heard a cry for help." The hall remained silent, filled with mixed emotions, fear, awe, and confusion. The debate was over. For the first time, the Galactic Council was not in control of the situation. Humanity was far away. The stars shimmered as the human fleet moved through hyperspace, leaving trails of light behind them. They were heading straight for the Valari system, their engines burning with determination. The message had been sent, the call had been heard, and the answer was already on its way. The Galactic Council, once the symbol of order and peace, could only watch as a new kind of power began to rise in the galaxy. A power born not from politics or fear, but from action. And thus began the story that would shake the entire galaxy. The moment when the Galactic Council realized that when humanity heard a cry for help, they did not wait. They did not debate. They simply answered. On Earth, the stars above the night sky glowed brighter than usual, but few people knew that history was about to change. Inside the unified Human Command headquarters in New Geneva, alarms flashed across every screen. The message had arrived from the Galactic Council network, carrying a single desperate transmission from the Valari species. It wasn't the first time humanity had seen an SOS from another world, but this one was different. The message wasn't just a call for help, it was a cry of extinction. Human command officers gathered in the main operations room, where holograms of planets and fleets hovered in the air. The Valari homeworld was highlighted in red, surrounded by dozens of unknown enemy ships. The signal analysis confirmed the worst. Their defenses were gone, their main cities were burning, and they had only hours left before total collapse. The room was silent except for the hum of computers. Then Admiral Jonas Cade, a tall, gray-haired officer with sharp eyes, stepped forward. "What's the Council's response?" he asked. The AI system replied, "No unified action approved. Council still in debate." Cade's expression turned hard. "So they're waiting for votes while millions die," he muttered. He turned to his officers. "Prepare Operation Aegis response. Priority 1. No one questioned him. They all knew what that meant. Humanity would act even without permission. Across the solar system, orders spread instantly. On Earth, massive orbital shipyards around the moon lit up like rings of fire. In the silent void above Mars, factories began releasing enormous warships from their docks. Each ship was a masterpiece of human engineering. Black hulls designed to absorb light, engines capable of jumping across light years, and weapons powerful enough to split moons. The fleet that began to awaken was not just a rescue force. It was humanity's most dangerous armada, built for one purpose: to protect life at any cost. Down on Earth, in the training grounds of the Terran Defense Corps, soldiers were already being briefed. Young men and women stood in perfect formation as their commanders spoke. "We are not going to conquer," one officer said. "We are going to save." But every soldier there knew that saving others sometimes meant fighting harder than ever before. While the preparations continued, human scientists worked in silence. In the deep labs of Titan Station, engineers activated the fleet AI system known as Orion. Its blue light pulsed as it came online. "Distress call acknowledged," the AI spoke in a calm voice. "Volari system coordinates locked. Tactical strategy initiating." Dozens of smaller AIs synchronized instantly, connecting every ship, every drone, every weapon into a single vast network, a living machine of war. The first ships to launch were the Vanguard Scouts. They vanished into subspace tunnels invisible to the eye. They would arrive hours before the main fleet to collect real-time battle data. Behind them, the heavy carriers began to form up. The flagship, HSS Invictus, towered over them all. A floating city with a crew of 10,000, its hull lined with railguns, plasma batteries, and hangar bays filled with drones and fighter craft. Its captain, Mira Solon, stood on the bridge as the engines roared to life. "Fleet status?" she asked. "All ships reporting green," her second-in-command replied. "Course locked for Volari system." She looked out through the massive viewing window, seeing Earth below, a small blue world wrapped in white clouds. "Signal the Council," she said. "Message distress call received. Humanity is en route." The message left Earth within seconds, traveling through the subspace network to reach the Galactic Council station. When the message arrived at the Council chamber, chaos followed. Delegates stood in shock. The human fleet had not asked for permission. They had not waited for authorization. They had simply responded. "They can't do that," one alien shouted. "That's against every rule." But the human representative, Commander Ilara Hayes, said nothing. She just looked up at the screen, watching the glowing symbols of the fleet moving across space. Inside, she felt both fear and pride. She knew humanity's history, their power, their fire, their relentless drive to protect. Once they decided to act, nothing in the galaxy could stop them. Meanwhile, in human space, the great exodus of ships continued. Orbital cities turned their lights toward the stars as the fleet passed overhead. Civilians gathered in crowds, watching the glowing trails across the night sky. News broadcasts across Earth called it the Great Response. Reporters spoke of courage, unity, and sacrifice. Families watched silently as their loved ones boarded ships, knowing they might not return. In the far corners of the galaxy, other races received the news through intercepted transmissions. Some admired the humans, calling them heroes. Others feared what might happen next. The Dravari Empire's leader, watching the transmission, whispered to his aide, "If they succeed, they'll change everything. If they fail, the galaxy loses its most dangerous ally." Back on the Invictus, Captain Mira walked along the bridge, her boots echoing softly against the floor. "How many ships in total?" she asked. 277 confirmed, with additional reinforcements from Mars and Luna docks joining soon, her officer answered. "ETA to Volari system, 11 hours 23 minutes. She nodded. The air was tense but calm. Her crew knew the importance of what they were doing. This wasn't just another mission. It was about who humanity really was. In the engineering bay, workers secured the final energy cores. Sparks flew as plasma lines connected. The ship hummed like a living creature preparing for battle. In the medical wing, doctors arranged supplies and robotic medics checked systems. Even the smallest maintenance drones seemed to move faster, as if they understood what was at stake. As the fleet left the outer edge of the solar system, Earth grew smaller and smaller behind them. Every crew member on every ship took one last look at their home world. Some whispered quiet prayers. Others promised they'd return. The stars ahead glowed like a pathway guiding them toward the unknown. The moment the fleet entered subspace, the galaxy changed. Every sensor in the Council network detected the movement. The subspace corridors, normally quiet and empty, were now filled with human energy signatures. The speed was incredible. No other species had mastered such efficient jump drives. It was as if humanity had prepared for this day all along. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, diplomats and military observers stared at their holographic displays. The human fleet had already crossed half the distance to the Valari system. Impossible, one delegate whispered. They move faster than our entire navy. Another replied, this is why they are feared. They don't hesitate. They act. In the Valari system itself, the skies were burning. The alien invaders continued their assault, their ships dark and silent like ghosts. The Valari defense grid flickered weakly. Their leader, High Chancellor Renal, watched the last of his fleet fall. It's over, he said quietly to his council. No one is coming. But then one of his aides shouted, Sir, there's something on the long-range scanner, many signals. Hundreds! Back on Earth, Admiral Cade received confirmation. The fleet had completed the jump. The Valari system was in range. He stood before the massive screen showing the live tactical feed. To all ships, he said over the channel, this is not about conquest. It's about responsibility. The galaxy may not understand us, but they will remember what we stand for. Protect the innocent. Destroy the threat. Show them who we are. As the message played across every ship, thousands of human soldiers listened in silence. Many clenched their fists, ready for battle. Some thought of their families. Some thought of the promise humanity had made to itself centuries ago, to never turn away from a cry for help. In the Valari capital, explosions thundered as the last defense towers fell. The citizens huddled underground, the heat from above shaking the walls. A small child looked up at his mother and asked, Will someone save us? She hugged him tightly, not knowing what to say. Then suddenly the shaking stopped. The roar of explosions faded. Outside, the night sky glowed bright white for a moment, then filled with hundreds of streaks of light descending from orbit. It was the human fleet. The Invictus and its escort ships emerged from subspace like shadows tearing through light. Massive warships spread across the stars, their formation perfect and silent. For a brief moment, everything was still, the calm before the storm. On the bridge, Captain Mira's voice echoed across the communication network. Valari Prime, this is the Terran Armada. Your call for help has been received. You are not alone. In that single moment, millions of Valari citizens looked to the sky with tears in their eyes. For them, it was not just the arrival of ships, it was the arrival of hope. And for the first time in galactic history, the Council realized something extraordinary. Humanity did not need permission to do what was right. They had heard the call, and they had answered it with everything they had. The journey had begun, and the deadliest fleet ever built by human hands was about to show the galaxy what it truly meant to protect. The silence of space around the Valari system was broken by flashes of light as hundreds of human warships emerged from subspace. The blackness of the void filled with glowing blue engines and the metallic glint of massive ships forming into perfect battle formation. The sudden arrival shook the scanners of every remaining Valari defense post. Their computers struggled to process what was happening. At first, many thought it was another wave of the enemy. But when the signals were identified, disbelief spread. The codes were human. High above Valari Prime, the sky shimmered. The human fleet appeared in layers like waves of an ocean. Giant carriers stretched across the horizon, flanked by destroyers, gunships, and support cruisers. The flagship, HSS Invictus, took its position at the center. A dark, majestic ship the size of a small moon, its hull marked with the symbol of Earth. Its armor reflected the light of the Valari sun like a blade ready for war. Inside the bridge of the Invictus, Captain Mira Solan stood in front of a large transparent screen showing the battlefield. Her crew worked quickly, running scans and setting up communication links. Enemy fleet status? She asked. Her tactical officer replied, 250 enemy ships remaining. They're attacking Valari Prime directly. Defensive grid is gone. Civilian losses, catastrophic. Mira's jaw tightened. Send a message to the invaders. she ordered. "Open a channel on all frequencies." A short moment later, her voice echoed across the system, carried by satellites and emergency relays. "This is the Terran Armada of Earth. Cease fire immediately and retreat, or we will engage." The message spread like lightning through the enemy fleet. But there was no reply. Instead, their ships turned their weapons toward the new arrivals. Bright streams of plasma and energy burst from their cannons, lighting up the darkness. The first shots of the battle had been fired. "Engage," Mira said calmly. Then everything happened at once. Human ships moved like one living organism. Hundreds of small drones launched from carriers, their silver wings catching the light as they swarmed toward the enemy. Railguns thundered, firing hypervelocity slugs that glowed like falling stars. Torpedoes cut through space, guided by artificial intelligence systems that could predict enemy maneuvers before they even happened. The Invictus fired its main gun. The weapon was so powerful that even space itself seemed to tremble. A blinding beam of light shot out, cutting through the void and slicing an enemy battleship in half. The explosion was so large it illuminated the entire planet's orbit. In seconds, the Raiders' formation broke. Their ships tried to scatter, but the humans were too fast. The smaller human frigates darted between explosions, dropping EMP mines and magnetic traps that disabled enemy shields. Drone squadrons attacked like metallic storms, overwhelming ships with precise strikes. The coordination was perfect. No human gave random orders. Every move was calculated, every strike planned. The enemy had no time to react. On the surface of Valari Prime, survivors hiding in the ruins looked up. The dark sky was glowing with streaks of blue and white light as battles raged high above. For hours they had heard nothing but explosions and screams. Now they heard something else. Thunder rolling from the heavens, steady and powerful. Hope began to rise in their hearts. The enemy's main dreadnought, a massive ship covered in black armor, tried to retreat. It launched hundreds of missiles toward the Invictus. Mira didn't flinch. "Activate Aegis Barrier," she ordered. The ship's shields expanded, glowing gold as the missiles struck and dissolved harmlessly. "Return fire," the Invictus answered with a storm of energy blasts. Each shot tore apart a section of the dreadnought's hull until the entire vessel broke apart and vanished into the flames of its own reactor. The shockwave rippled through space, rocking the smaller ships nearby. Throughout the battle, human communication was short and precise. "Target locked. Shield at 72%. Enemy carrier destroyed." Every voice carried calm focus. They were not fighting for conquest, they were fighting for lives. Within 20 minutes, half of the enemy fleet was gone. The rest began to scatter, trying to flee into subspace. But the humans were ready for that too. Specialized interceptors, small ships known as Valkyries, activated gravitational snares preventing enemy jumps. One by one, the remaining ships were hunted down. Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council chamber light years away, delegates watched the live feed in stunned silence. Every screen displayed the same image: the human fleet dominating the battlefield. No other civilization had ever seen such speed, precision, and power. The invaders, who had seemed unstoppable, were being erased in moments. Some of the council members whispered to each other, their voices trembling. "They're monsters," one said. Another replied, "No, they're saviors." Back in the Valari system, the battle turned into cleanup operations. Human medical frigates entered orbit, deploying drones to rescue surviving Valari ships. On the ground, landing crafts descended into the ruined cities. Soldiers in white and silver armor moved through the smoke, helping civilians out of collapsed buildings. The Valari people who had thought they would die wept openly when they saw the humans. One young Valari soldier, injured and covered in dust, looked up at the towering figure of a human marine offering him a hand. The alien could barely speak, but his words were full of emotion. "You came," he whispered. The marine smiled beneath his helmet. "Of course we did." Above them, the last enemy ship tried to escape the system, but the Invictus locked onto it. Mira watched the tactical screen. "Target acquired," her officer said. "It's the flagship of the invaders." She nodded. "End it." The Invictus's cannons fired one final shot. A massive railgun burst that tore through the enemy vessel and left nothing but drifting metal. Silence returned to the stars. The battle was over. For a few moments, no one spoke on the human channels. The destruction was total, but the cost had been high. Several smaller human ships had taken heavy damage, and some were gone entirely. Yet the mission was a success. The Volari were saved. Mira exhaled slowly, leaning against the console. "Send a transmission to the Volari leadership," she said. "Tell them their world is safe." As her voice echoed across the system, the Volari capital received the message. It spread across their remaining networks, across cities still burning, across the ruins of homes. When the people heard the words, "You are safe," a sound filled the planet that no one had heard since the war began. It was the sound of relief, of survival, of hope. On the council station, the delegates continued watching the recording. Even though the battle had ended, no one left their seats. The images on the screens showed human ships moving gracefully among debris, collecting survivors, giving aid to the wounded, and disabling remaining enemy wreckage. There was no victory celebration, no arrogance, just quiet efficiency. One of the elder council members finally spoke. "They fought like machines, but saved like angels." Another replied softly, "Now you understand why they are called Death Worlders. Their planet taught them how to survive everything, even themselves." In orbit above Volari Prime, the human fleet began repair operations. Engineers worked non-stop to restore power grids and communication systems on the surface. Supply drops were made with food, medicine, and shelter units. The Volari leaders tried to contact Captain Mira personally, wanting to thank her, but she refused to take credit. "You don't owe us thanks," she told them. "We heard your call." That was enough. For the next few hours, the fleet remained on standby in case of further attacks. The debris field was scanned carefully, and all traces of the enemy were documented. Human scientists already began analyzing the enemy technology to understand who they were and why they attacked. When the Council finally contacted Mira, they demanded to know why humanity had acted without permission. Her reply was calm and firm. "Because waiting for permission would have cost millions of lives. We don't stand by when someone screams for help." That single sentence spread across the galactic networks like wildfire. To some, it was arrogance. To others, it was bravery. But to the Volari, it was salvation. As the human fleet slowly prepared to leave orbit, the people of Volari Prime gathered outside their shelters to look at the sky. The sight of the human warships glowing in the upper atmosphere became a symbol of hope. Children pointed at them with wide eyes. Elders whispered prayers of gratitude. One Volari poet would later write, "We saw fire in the sky, and we thought it was our end, but it was not death that came to us. It was humanity." When the last human ship jumped back into subspace, the Volari world was left in silence once again. But this time it was a peaceful silence. The war was over. And across the galaxy, stories of the Invictus fleet spread like legends. No one could deny what had just happened. The most advanced and feared fleet in history had answered a call for help. Not for power, not for reward, but for compassion. And in doing so, humanity had shown the galaxy something that words could not explain. That even the deadliest species among the stars could also be the most human. When the Galactic Council finally understood the situation on the planet Arvion, it was already too late to stop what was coming. Humanity's fleet was already on its way. The call for help that had echoed through the void of space had reached Earth's Defense Command. The message was simple, a desperate plea from a civilization that could no longer defend itself. But when humans heard that innocent lives were being wiped out by a ruthless alien force, they did not hesitate. For them, it wasn't just a matter of politics or diplomacy. It was about survival, compassion, and justice. The council members, sitting in their grand chamber surrounded by holographic displays, watched as data poured in about the human response. Thousands of warships were mobilizing. The Death Worlders, as they were called by other species, had unleashed their full strength. On Earth, the atmosphere was filled with urgency. Alarms echoed through the orbital docks. Technicians rushed to load supplies and pilots prepared their crafts. The United Earth Command had authorized Operation Shieldfire, the largest military deployment in human history. Admiral Sarah Kovacs, known for her calm but fierce leadership, stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Titan's Wrath. Her face was set in determination as she looked at the holomap displaying the Arvion system. She knew this wasn't just another mission. It was a moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. For too long, other species had viewed humans as unpredictable, emotional, and dangerous. Now they would see why. Back in the Galactic Council Hall, representatives from dozens of worlds watched in awe and fear. Some whispered in disbelief. Others trembled. The scale of humanity's mobilization was beyond anything they had ever seen. The Council's High Speaker, a being of light and energy known as Corin Val, turned to the Ambassador of Earth, a man named Dr. Ethan Miles. "Do your people truly intend to send such a force? This is madness. You'll destroy half the system!" Ethan's expression was calm but cold. "We warned you," he said quietly. "When you ignored Arvion's call for help, you left them to die. We won't." Those words echoed across the chamber, heavy and final. Meanwhile, on Arvion, the planet's skies were black with smoke. The invaders, an insectoid species known as the Krail, were relentless. Cities were reduced to ashes. The surviving Arvionians, once a proud race of scholars and engineers, now huddled in bunkers praying for a miracle. And then they saw it. Through the clouds of dust and flame, the first human ships broke through the atmosphere. Massive, gleaming, and deadly, the lead vessel descended like a god of war, casting a shadow that stretched across the ruins. The Krail's radar systems went wild as hundreds of smaller ships followed in perfect formation. Humanity had arrived. The first strike came without warning. The sky erupted in blue light as human rail cannons fired from orbit, targeting enemy strongholds with surgical precision. Each impact sent shockwaves that shook the ground. The Krail, who had dominated the battlefield for weeks, suddenly found themselves overpowered. Human drop pods slammed into the ground, opening to reveal soldiers in black armor, moving in perfect coordination. Their rifles hummed with energy. Their movements were swift and deliberate. They didn't shout or celebrate. They simply advanced. To them, this wasn't about glory. It was about saving lives and ending suffering. Back in the Council, the other species watched the live feeds in silence. They had never seen warfare like this. The humans didn't fight like anyone else. They didn't just destroy. They protected. Their warships placed shields over evacuation zones to protect civilians. Their medics landed alongside troops treating the wounded, even those from other species. To the Council, it was chaos. To the humans, it was order. Admiral Kovacs issued calm commands as the operation continued. "Prioritize civilian zones. No unnecessary damage," she said firmly. Her officers responded instantly, their voices steady despite the chaos of battle. It was clear that humanity's military was more than a weapon. It was a machine of compassion guided by discipline and purpose. The soldiers on the ground fought with precision and restraint, eliminating enemy positions without collateral harm. They were feared for their strength but respected for their control. The Krail tried to retaliate. Their swarm ships attacked the human fleet, filling the void with missiles and plasma fire. But the Titan's Wrath and her escorts responded with overwhelming force. Lasers and kinetic projectiles tore through the Krail vessels like paper. Within hours, the invaders' fleet was in ruins. Arvian skies began to clear. For the first time in months, sunlight touched the planet's surface again. When the Galactic Council realized what was happening, panic spread among them. "They'll wipe out the Krail entirely," one counselor shouted. "We must intervene." But others hesitated. For years, the Council had debated and delayed every humanitarian action. Now humanity had acted decisively, and it was working. The moral question lingered in the air. Should they stop the humans, or should they learn from them? On the ground, the last of the Krail forces were surrounded. A human soldier, Captain Ryan Hayes, approached their leader, a towering insectoid general with burning red eyes. "It's over," Hayes said quietly. The Krail general hissed, its mandibles clicking in fury. "You think you can protect them forever?" It snarled. Hayes didn't answer. He simply raised his weapon and ended the threat. The war was over. The silence that followed was heavy and deep, broken only by the distant hum of human ships withdrawing to orbit. When the news reached the Galactic Council, the entire hall stood still. The screen showed Arvian's people stepping out from their shelters, staring up at the human ships that hovered above them like guardians. Some wept, others fell to their knees in gratitude. For the Arvionians, humanity had become their savior. For the rest of the galaxy, humanity had become something far more complex, a force that could not be ignored or controlled. Dr. Ethan Miles stood before the council again, his voice calm. "We didn't come for power. We came because someone asked for help. Remember that." His words carried a quiet warning. Humanity had proven its strength, but also its heart. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. They had always viewed humans as dangerous, but now they realized that danger wasn't born of cruelty. It was born of conviction. Admiral Kovacs looked out at the stars from her ship's command deck. She knew the council would talk for years about what had happened, but she didn't care. All that mattered was that lives had been saved. The Deathworlders had done what no one else dared to do. They had answered the call. And in doing so, they had changed the balance of the galaxy forever. As the fleet slowly departed Arvion's orbit, the Arvionians lit a signal in the sky, a beam of light shaped like the symbol of humanity. It was their way of saying thank you. Across the galaxy, countless civilizations watched the images being broadcast. Some felt hope, others fear. But one thing was certain, humanity's message was clear. If anyone cried out for help, Earth would hear them. And when humanity answered, the galaxy would witness not just war, but a force of compassion so powerful that even the stars would take notice. The battle for Arvion was over, but its echoes spread across the galaxy. Every news channel, every communication relay, and every council chamber spoke of only one thing: humanity's fleet. The Deathworlders, as they were still called by many, had done something no other race had ever dared to do. They had faced the Krail, the most feared invaders in the galaxy, and crushed them completely. But what shocked everyone was not their power, it was their purpose. They didn't conquer. They didn't demand tribute or control. They simply helped and left. For the Galactic Council, this act was both inspiring and terrifying. It showed that humans had the strength to challenge anyone, and the will to act on their own terms. In the days following the battle, the once destroyed planet Arvion began to heal. Human engineers and medics worked side by side with Arvionians, rebuilding homes, restoring energy grids, and providing food and clean water. Children who had once hidden in underground shelters now played in the open fields again, their laughter mixing with the hum of human machinery. The Arvionians looked up at the massive human ships in their skies not with fear, but with deep respect. They had learned that behind humanity's fierce reputation was a heart that burned with empathy. They were protectors, not conquerors. Admiral Sarah Kovacs stood aboard her flagship, Titan's Wrath, watching the planet below through the observation deck. Her reflection in the glass looked tired but proud. Months of preparation, travel, and battle had finally come to an end. She had seen both the best and worst of humanity in those days, the courage, the pain, the sacrifice. Hundreds of human soldiers had given their lives to save people they had never met, from a world they had never known. To her, that was the essence of being human. As her second-in-command approached, he said softly, "Orders from Earth, Admiral. The fleet is to return home." She nodded. "Make it so. We've done what we came to do." But even as the fleet prepared to depart, the Galactic Council was in chaos. Emergency meetings were held day and night. Many council members demanded that humanity be restricted, that their military power be monitored, even limited. "They are too dangerous," one alien delegate shouted. "If they decide to act again without permission, what happens then? Who can stop them?" Others, however, disagreed. "They saved an entire civilization," another argued. "They did what we could not. We should learn from them, not fear them." The hall erupted into argument after argument with no side winning. For the first time in galactic history, the Council found itself powerless because humanity had proven they didn't need permission to do what was right. Dr. Ethan Miles, Earth's ambassador, sat quietly through most of these debates. When finally asked to speak, he rose and looked at the gathered representatives. "You fear us because we act when you hesitate," he said. "But understand this, we do not seek war. We do not seek control. We seek peace, and when that peace is broken, we act. Not for power, but for life. His words silenced the room. Many looked at him with suspicion, but a few nodded in quiet agreement. Deep down, they all knew he was right. The Council's endless debates and fear of risk had caused the deaths of millions over the years. Humanity had simply refused to let another tragedy happen. On Arvion, the humans began their withdrawal. As ships lifted off from the surface, Arvionian crowds gathered to wave goodbye. They sang songs in their own language, songs of gratitude and rebirth. The human soldiers standing on their landing ramps saluted in return. Some smiled, some cried. They had seen too much suffering, but they had also seen hope return to a world that was nearly lost. In one of the villages, a young Arvionian girl handed a human medic a small crystal pendant. "So you don't forget us," she said shyly. The medic smiled and placed it around his neck. "We won't," he promised before boarding his shuttle. As the last ship left Arvion's atmosphere, the planet's night sky glowed with hundreds of tiny lights, torches held by the survivors in honor of those who had fallen. It was a sight that moved even the hardest of soldiers to tears. Humanity had left a piece of itself there, not through dominance but through kindness and sacrifice. Back on Earth, the return of the fleet was met with both celebration and mourning. Cities across the planet held ceremonies for the fallen. Their names were projected across skyscrapers, remembered as heroes not of conquest but of compassion. Admiral Kovacs stood before a massive crowd in Geneva, giving her final report to the United Earth Council. "We went to save lives," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "And we did. Humanity showed the galaxy that strength without compassion is hollow. We will continue to stand for those who cannot stand for themselves." The crowd erupted in applause, the sound echoing through the streets. But the story did not end there. Across the galaxy, smaller civilizations began to reach out to Earth, some asking for alliances, others simply sending messages of thanks. The Arvionians sent a special transmission, a broadcast showing the symbol of humanity carved into their rebuilt city's central plaza. Beneath it was a single line in both languages. "They came when no one else would." That phrase spread across galactic networks like fire. It became a symbol of hope and courage. The Galactic Council, still shaken, finally came to a realization. Humanity could not be ignored or controlled. They had to be understood. A delegation was sent to Earth to discuss a new kind of alliance, one built not on fear but on cooperation. Dr. Miles greeted them personally, offering peace and partnership. "If we are to share the stars," he said, "we must do it together." And though not everyone trusted the humans yet, the first steps toward unity had begun. In the deep reaches of space far beyond Arvion, another signal was sent out, a distress call from a distant colony under attack. The message was faint, but it reached human ears. In the command center of the United Earth Fleet, alarms lit up once more. Officers looked toward Admiral Kovacs, who now served as the Supreme Commander. She stared at the transmission for a long moment, then said softly, "Prepare the fleet." There was no hesitation, no debate. Orders were sent. Engines roared to life. Humanity was moving again. As the armada gathered, thousands of ships forming a silver river in the darkness, Kovacs looked out into the stars and whispered to herself, "If they need us, we will come." Her words became a vow carried across generations. In the Galactic Council Hall, as news of the fleet's movement reached them, many members sat in silence. Some feared another act of destruction, but others felt something different, a spark of faith. The High Speaker, Corin Val, finally broke the silence. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "they are not the danger we thought. Perhaps they are the light we have long forgotten." His words hung in the air, and for the first time the Council began to see humanity not as Deathworlders, but as guardians of the galaxy. The stars outside shone brighter that night. Across the cosmos, stories of humanity spread, of soldiers who fought not for glory but for peace, of ships that came when all hope was lost, of a species that turned fear into faith. The legend of Earth's fleet grew, whispered in every corner of the galaxy. And somewhere, on a quiet world rebuilding from war, a child looked up at the night sky and asked her mother, "Do you think they'll ever come back?" Her mother smiled and replied, "Only if we need them, dear. Only if we need them." Far beyond, engines flared to life as the human fleet jumped into hyperspace, disappearing among the stars. And in that silence, one truth echoed through the galaxy. When humanity hears the call for help, they will answer. And when they do, the universe will never be the same again.